Robert Zemeckis, Stanley Kubrick, Martin Scorsese, James
Michael
Cameron,
Bay. Oh,
Orson Welles, and Julius Freeman with Sean Malone and James Callahan.
Hello, everyone. Just for the record, guys, you were live when you were talking, which is even
great,
better.
great.
Which is even better. Welcome to another edition of Talking Cinema. I'm your host, Julius Freeman, and my co-host, Sean Malone and James Callahan. Welcome back to the show. Sean could not join us last week because he had a prior engagement, but he's now with us this week to talk about Disney's Star Wars. Now, the reason why I say Disney Star Wars is due to the fact that when George Lucas sold the Star Wars IP, including the Indiana Jones IP, to Disney, I was under the impression, personally, I don't know about you guys, but I was under the impression that they were going to keep George as an advisor of some kind. You know, someone that's going to be in the background, someone who's going to say, yeah, this is going to work, this is not going to work. But not so much a producer like Kathleen Kennedy, but just something like, hey, let's ask the guy who created the series what he thinks, and then maybe depending on his input, we'll put it in or not put it in. But to my surprise, the documentary that they put out, I think it was a few months before The Force Awakens was released. I watched it. It was great. It was fun. It was very exciting to see a new Star Wars coming out. And I noticed one thing in this documentary. It was like a 5-minute or 10-minute documentary. I can't remember how long it was. I realized not one single person gave George Lucas any credit for the creation of Star Wars. It was all about Star Wars is just a phenomenon. Star Wars is just this. Star Wars is such a staple in our culture. Star Wars this, Star Wars that. But never once, not J.J. Abrams, not the actors, not anybody who they interviewed in that little small 10-minute documentary did they ever say, oh man, George Lucas was the mastermind behind it. So when I saw that, I knew we're in trouble. I knew they cut him out. They don't care that he created it. They just cared that they had it, and that was it. And that was done. And so I knew, this is not a good sign. Not a good sign. Fresh news. Oh, a first timer. I don't think I've ever seen you here. Star Wars has gone to the dogs. Well, if you stick around, I'm going to have to agree with you partially there. Fresh news. So we got a corporate. Now we have a new Star Wars, right? So in the prequels, we had peak George Lucas, someone who had, peak powers at that time in his career. He was the George Lucas. No one dared to say no to him, and the prequels kind of suffered because of it. And then in the classic trilogy, we had, I guess you could say, super George Lucas, the one who could do no wrong. He gambled, and it paid off. And the movies are considered still to be classics. But now we have a new Star Wars saga that's completely in control of a multinational corporation called Disney. And they totally cut out the guy who created the series, and they just took it over. And now we have The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. Right? Was that correct? I don't want to miss that last title up. Okay, Rise of Skywalker. So I have my thoughts. I'm sure you guys have your thoughts. Let's start with The Force Awakens. Sean, what were your first thoughts? Did you hate it? Did you love it? What was the first, when, I'm sure you were giddy like myself and James were when the movie came out. We were giddy. We were like, okay, here it is, the new Star Wars. We're here. Let's go. Tell us your first thoughts of the movie after you first saw it, or in general.
So I promise I won't spend too much time on this, but my first memory as a human being was seeing the Emperor electrocute Luke in the throne room. Like literally the first thing I can remember. And it turns out my folks and my aunt took me to the movie theater when I was like 2.5 years old, and and so literally that's my first memory as a person.
Wow.
Ever since then, then we had to wait so many years for the prequels to come out, and I mention all that just to say that there's never been, since Episode 1 came out in 1999, all the way up through Episode 9, which we'll discuss tonight. There's never been a time where I've gone into a movie theater to see a Star Wars movie where I'm seeing it for the first time where I did not cry or at least get teared up when I saw A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. And then you hear the blast of the music and you see the Star Wars scroll. That was such every single time it was like, oh, Brian Wood said he saw Jedi in the theater as a 2-year-old also. So
hell yeah.
Nice, Brian. 81ers, you got to stick together.
Yeah.
but yeah, so it's always been like a huge privilege, no matter what I end up thinking about the movie. It's always just like so exciting to see, like I'm seeing a Star Wars movie, so I definitely felt that way when Force Awakens came out. Every time there was a gap, between the original trilogy and the prequels and then prequels to the sequels, and you as a Star Wars fan, there's like that gap of so many years, and you're like, it feels like a drought, like when will I have more Star Wars? So in that respect, I was really excited about the movie. You know what I'm going to do tonight? Because I have a summary opinion of all these movies,
right?
But I'm going to save my summary till the end.
Okay.
And I'm just going to say, like, as the movies came out, how I felt about them. So the way I felt about Episode 7 when it came out was that JJ had a huge task. He had so many things to accomplish with this movie. He had to please the old fans. He had to bring in a generation of new fans. He had to connect it to the original trilogy, both in style and, thematically and all that, those kinds of things. He had to create something that was like what we'd seen before, because it had to be guaranteed. And then he had to, on top of all that, the movie had to make like $1 billion to be considered a success.
Right.
So after I saw the movie, I really felt like it wasn't my favorite Star Wars movie. I found it very derivative of the original movies. Obviously, there's Starkiller Base and the Death Star, and there's a lot of, Rey's journey on a desert planet. She's, all of it was very like familiar, like, we've seen this before. That all kind of bugged me as an older fan of the franchise. But I had to take my hat off to J.J. Abrams when I saw the movie, because I was like, you know what? He had like 10 impossible things he had to accomplish with this movie, artistically, financially, fan service, all of it. And he did a pretty good job. That's kind of was my overall feeling about the movie.
Yeah. When I was rewatching it again this week, I realized, you know what? They should have named this movie Star Wars Episode 9, The Force Recycled, because it was a glorified freaking remake of A New Hope. And yeah, I personally, all right, you guys are gonna, you might hate me, and maybe not. I don't know. I had to turn off the movie. I couldn't finish it. I couldn't finish this first movie upon rewatching it, and I went in with the mindset that I had with the prequels, which is, okay, I'm just gonna watch it and I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm not gonna hate on it. I'm just gonna enjoy it like a new fan. And I couldn't do it because of the atrocious character development, or the lack thereof, of the character Rey, which I wanted to root for. I really did want to root for Rey. I wanted, I was like, okay, cool. They're going to go with the female protagonist. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But she was too damn perfect. She knew how to drive the Millennium Falcon. She knew how to do the Jedi mind trick, the persuasion mind trick, without anyone training her. It was just, and I understood why, because of course her, we find out in Episode 3, which we'll discuss in a bit. But it's still like it was poor writing because of not establishing clues. As a writer, when you write a story, you got to give the audience clues, so that way in the end, when when the character develops, it makes sense within the confines of the story, right? So maybe if they had shown her doing already like doing some Jedi stuff without her like knowing, and maybe when she meets Han Solo in the movie, she could have been like, oh, I don't know, I just kind of picked up on it, and I just thought this was just something that I knew or whatever, and but they didn't do that, and they killed the movie for me. But that's not here or there. That's my. I could talk more about it. But James, I want to hear your general take on The Force Awakens. What did you think of it when you first watched this film? Did you think it was good? Did you think J.J. Abrams, like Sean said, delivered, even though he was under immense pressure by Disney to deliver on the product that should have raised $1 billion, which easily could have, considering the fact that Star Wars has such a strong fan base? What were your thoughts on The Force Awakens?
Well, at the time that it was released, I had so much anticipation for it because, I mean, I've been a fan my whole life, most of my life, and not only that, the circumstances of which the franchise was purchased under by Disney, I thought was the most ideal. I was at that point, that was 2012. And that was when the Avengers had come out, which I felt was like the moment where Marvel really came together and really sold me. And I became a huge fan of that franchise. And so the fact that Disney was going to be doing the same thing with Star Wars, I thought was incredible and a great idea on Lucas's part to finally just give up the franchise. And I felt like fix one of the biggest problems with the prequels for me, which is that I think that Lucas should have been a little bit more hands off with it, that he should have given it to he should have signed writers and directors, and he should have just stayed on as a producer. And so in 2012, when Disney acquired Star Wars and announced that they were going to be making more movies, I couldn't have been more excited. And I mean, I was so hyped in the lead up to this movie, and I feel like there's no way the movie could have really lived up to any of my expectations. Because I can't remember the last time I anticipated a movie so much. And while I will agree that The Force Awakens does use A New Hope as its template for its story, I think it does distance itself enough to be its own thing. And watching it this week, I was still blown away by how successful the film is as a piece of storytelling, as a film that introduces brand new characters that I feel like are very compelling. Abrams is incredible at casting sort of unknown actors and finding the right actors with the right chemistry and putting them together. I remember when the casting announcements came out and they announced John Boyega and Adam Driver and Oscar Isaac. I was so excited because I'd seen them in other films. And they were kind of, definitely on my radar at that point. And I love the idea that they were going with a total unknown with Daisy Ridley, and treating the original cast, the main three, as sort of being kind of in the background. And I just loved that idea. And so The Force Awakens it's a flawed film. But for a movie that I've seen many times, and I've, you minus the hype and all of the backlash and everything else that's come out, it's been 5 years since the film came out. I still think it's a fantastic movie. I still like the movie quite a bit.
Ugh.
I want to chime in here.
Go ahead, Sean.
So some of the things I feel like I have to get my grievances in with this movie. And my major grievance was when my favorite character, Luke Skywalker, is in the trailer for the movie. He's billed first. When you see the poster of the movie, he's literally billed first, like, first billing. And then you go to see the movie, he's not in the movie. And then at the very end of the movie, you see him for like 2 seconds and he doesn't speak. I wanted to throw my Coca-Cola at the screen. Like, it felt like to me a much worse version of like that top spinning at the end of Inception.
Oh, like, what? Come on, come on.
like oh, blah, 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 and you're like, you cut away from that. Like
That's the
Christian
point.
Nolan-
That was the point. That was the point, Sean. That was the point of the movie.
That's why I'm saying it was a much angrier feeling than the top spinning.
Okay. All right.
But that really upset me. Like I seriously, like, I'm a Return of the Jedi era Star Wars fan, you know, like that was the
Right.
one I think, you know, Jedi is not the strongest throughout, but I know you guys talked about this last week.
Yeah.
But it does have the strongest moments in the whole trilogy.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
You know, and especially that intimate showdown between Vader and Luke and the Emperor, which we can talk a little bit about when we get to Rise of Skywalker, because I think there's some parallels to be made there, but also some missteps that they made and things they didn't understand about that scene when they made Rise of Skywalker. But I'm digressing. All I'm saying is, where's Luke? And it really, really, it broke my heart because, like, Luke's my hero, you know? And the other thing I really didn't care for, other than the things I've already stated, is like no character growth on the part of Han Solo. It's like, he just like, oh, where's Han? Oh, he got scared of having a family and he ran away and now he's smuggling again. And it was just like, what? Like, that's not the Han Solo
development.
Yeah, exactly. Here's a story about a man. Yeah. You know, at the end of Jedi, it's like he's a general. You know, you get the feeling that he and Leia are going to start this, or, you know, fall in love and have this family together. And then, of course, you had the Timothy Zahn books, which kind of like explored that idea.
Yeah.
And then in Force Awakens, we see him, and it's like he's 35 years older and he hasn't changed one iota. And it bugged me so much because, like, you may think JJ or Disney or whoever, you may think that's what the fans want. You know, they want the old roguish Han Solo back. And maybe in large part, 90% of them did want that Han Solo. But, like, I wanted to see a Han Solo who had actually grown as a person. Who was still charming and still funny and, you know, still could wield a blaster like nobody else in the galaxy, but who had grown, you know, as a human being. So those are my biggest gripes, I think. And I mentioned that because James said, you know, the original cast kind of being in the background. That was a thing that, that didn't appeal to me as much.
I have to point out, because I'm coming at this from a different perspective, and I actually love Luke. I mean, obviously he's central to the franchise, and he's an incredible character. But there's a part of me that just loved the idea of treating his character as kind of like a Colonel Kurtz or a Harry Lime. Like, everyone talks about him, but you don't see him until the very end. And I just loved that. I thought that was incredible. And even though they're kind of like teasing, like, that's something that JJ loves to do is his mystery box filmmaking, and like, oh, I'm going to tease Luke the whole time, but I'm not going to really give him to you. You know, we'll just promise that we'll deal with that in the next one, which I'm not a huge fan of. But I felt like with this film, it worked. It left a lot for the next director to have to like work out and figure out. But as far as being like, basically, my philosophy or I felt like the philosophy with The Force Awakens was they had to make a film that united the fan base, that brought old fans, new fans, jaded fans together. And going off of what Julio said earlier about Disney trying to kind of advertise, and I think Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams himself had a lot to do with this, which was to advertise these new films as being kind of a referendum on the prequels. Like, they kept plugging this idea, like, oh, we're doing practical effects, we're shooting on film again. This is the Star Wars you remember.
There's X-Wings. There's TIE fighters and X-Wings.
And the more they lean in on that, the less interesting the movie is. And I definitely agree. Stuff with, like, a lot of the character stuff with Han Solo is a little disappointing. I think some of the stuff with Leia is a bit disappointing. But it is a film that I think has a really strong first act, even before like Han Solo comes back into the picture. I would say, like, up until that moment where they come through the Millennium Falcon and he does the Chewie, we're home. Like up until that point, I think it's an incredible film. Like it's one of my favorite Star Wars movies, and then it starts to kind of fall off from that point on. But yeah, like I definitely think it has some strong points, and depending on like which how you're coming to this film, and if you really just want to see Luke in action, yeah, I mean it's a disappointing film in that regard. But I kind of love the way they tease that throughout the film.
I'll agree with you on that one, James. Yeah, I did not mind that we didn't see Luke Skywalker until the end, because that was the story. The story was, right at the beginning when Poe is given the location of where Luke Skywalker is hiding at, and that's the whole story. That's what Kylo Ren wants, and that's the major plot point, right? So. Brian Wood says, yeah, I really wanted a reason why the whole galaxy and our characters were basically reset to the same place as the original trilogy, which, yes, you're right, Brian. That is true. That was a disappointing factor for me as well, because I also wanted to see, General Han Solo. I wanted to see, General
Skywalker,
the director of the New Republic, Princess Leia. That's what I wanted to see. And they had the right idea. Maybe what they could have done was, the New Republic was not strong, and it led to the rise of the the Dark Order that's rising. And then it would have made sense, but they didn't go there for whatever reason. But go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
You hit the nail right on the head, which is like, and James, I appreciate what you're saying about like as a film, right? Like, and that's kind of what I was sort of what I was trying to get at earlier, was like as an accomplishment. As a filmmaking accomplishment, I was impressed by the movie on a lot of levels, but like for story and for character, there's so many ways in which I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like the Empire falls and like they have 30 years to like build a new government, and like they're still like running around like a ragtag bunch of rebels, like to get no sense of like why they're still in the same situation.
It's disappointing that it's not more clearly defined. I definitely agree. And it is a problem.
And I think maybe they correctly observed that like in the original, in the prequels, it was like, well, the Trade Federation is having a dispute, and fans were like, what? Like, and they were like, you know what? We need to get away from all this like heady like political analogy that were done in the prequels, but it's like they got away from it completely, and they just followed the template of the original trilogy of like rebels and bad guys, and it was like George built a more complex universe than that. The story could have gone to a different, more interesting place.
I absolutely
and Force
agree.
Awakens has bright moments. Like, for instance, I love that Kylo Ren's character was able to stop blasters, the blaster rays with using the Force. That was great. I love the fact that he was like a Darth Vader wannabe. He wanted to really emulate that Darth Vader, persona. But then at the same time, it's like, wait a minute. But if you were taught by Luke, wouldn't have Luke taught you that I brought my father out of the dark side and he turned good? So why do you want to embrace that when I taught you? This thing's like, to the old fans anyway, it didn't work. I understand for the new fans, it didn't matter, because the new fans probably are not as obsessive as we are with the old trilogy. So I see Disney failed in a lot of ways, because they could have done both. They could have done both services for the old fans and the new fans if they had just met in the middle. Which and I feel personally, this was definitely a glorified remake of A New Hope, and I did not like Rey, Daisy Ridley's character. I did not like her. I couldn't identify with her. I couldn't. There's got to be some kind of like me cheering her on, and I couldn't cheer her on because she was just too good. She was good at everything, to the point where it was like I don't care about this character. The only character I cared about was
Admiral Akbar.
No. Gosh, I don't know why I can't remember his, is it Ray?
Finn?
Yeah. No, Finn. Thank you. Finn was the only character I cared about in the movie, because he was a stormtrooper. He was having some moral, he was having some moral dilemmas with what he was doing, especially that first scene when they massacred the village, and he escapes and he's freaked out. He's scared. He doesn't want to go back, but then he overcomes it to save, Rey. And that was the only thing I cared about in the movie was his story, Finn's story in the movie. And then of course we get the same ending like we did in New Hope, to destroy the planet, and then we segue to The Last Jedi, which is directed by Rian Johnson. So
I'm sorry, you mean Ruin Johnson?
Well, believe it or not, this might come as a shock to you and everyone out there. I actually liked The Last Jedi. I actually thought The Last Jedi should have been episode, the first episode, The Force Awakens. I think that's what they should have started with. That kill the past, move forward. Let's get rid of the Skywalker saga and let's start exploring the Star Wars universe with this the Force power and what it can mean for the future of the Star Wars saga. So, James, what do you think of The Last Jedi? Did you think it was a good step forward after The Force Awakens, or did you think it was a step back, a step in the wrong direction? Go.
Well, it certainly wasn't the film that I expected when it was released, and it was a movie that I had to grapple with upon my first viewing, and I went back to go see it again because I was just really not expecting, after this, after The Force Awakens, which felt so safe and derivative, to have a film that seemed to challenge everything that came before, and I realized after a second viewing, and now a few years later, that The Last Jedi is, without question, in my opinion, the best Star Wars movie that's not a part of the original trilogy. It is the most interesting. It's the most compelling. It's the most challenging. It's the most beautiful to look at. Every shot of the movie is incredibly designed. It is. I love the film from start to finish. It has some flaws, certainly, but to me, I actually like The Force Awakens more because The Last Jedi exists. Because all of my issues with The Force Awakens are kind of addressed in The Last Jedi. All of the stuff that felt too familiar and derivative, like Rian Johnson does such an incredible job of taking a lot of that unnecessary stuff and just getting rid of it. Like you said, kill the past. Like, we don't need a Palpatine-like villain with Snoke. Let's just kill him off. Like, he's just, it's too much, and it's unnecessary. And there's so many aspects of the film like that I really love, and it kind of boils down to one scene in that film that I think makes this entire trilogy worthwhile, which is the scene where Luke is giving the lesson to Rey about Darth Sidious and how Sidious was deceived, or I'm sorry, that Sidious one man was able to deceive the entire Jedi because of their hubris. And one of my favorite sort of meta aspects of this film is that I have interpreted Luke like running on and abandoning the Star War as being his reaction to the prequels, basically. Like, he's a fan that saw the prequels and he was like, oh my God, the Jedi are terrible. Like, they were awful. Like, every decision they made was terrible. And that's why the galaxy is in this ruin. Like, we're obviously the problem here. I'm going to remove myself from the equation and just get out of here. And I've always just really loved that aspect of the film. And it's made me think that, like, at least in terms of this film and The Force Awakens, I think that the Last Jedi does such a good job of making The Force Awakens a better movie.
That's an interesting take on it. Yeah. Rashawn, your thoughts?
We have a comment. We have a comment, Julio.
Let's see. Brian Wood says, I love The Last Jedi as an agent of chaos coming in the tiers in the Star Wars, to tear Star Wars apart. There were really interesting ideas about the Force and stopping light versus dark, but they didn't have to shit on Luke.
I couldn't have.
Fair enough.
Made no sense unless exactly we see Luke as a meta audience standing saying, nope, I'm out. So, So Sean, go ahead. Go ahead, and then
Well,
I'll share my thoughts on that.
I
What Brian
agree.
said.
I agree quite a bit with what James said. I couldn't have said it better myself, and I agree quite a bit with what Brian said. The way I felt about Luke in this movie was not the Luke I knew or know,
Right.
not the Luke I would have portrayed if I had made the film, but gutsy move. Rian Johnson had something to say, and even though I don't necessarily like everything Johnson has decided to say with this movie, he had the guts to say something with this movie.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing, like, that I feel like Johnson gets in this sequel trilogy that the other films are absent of, which is, what are you trying to say with this movie? What are the themes? What are the ideas behind it? George always had big ideas and big themes about good and evil, and about the corruption of power, and hubris, and and how political power gets corrupted, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like JJ really understood like the emotional aspect of Star Wars, but not the thematic and especially the spiritual aspect of Star Wars, like George Lucas intended. And I think Johnson gets to the heart of that a lot better, in this movie. So I really liked the movie, even though I didn't, again, what Luke was in the movie was like, I didn't like love it, that aspect of it, but I respected the heck out of the movie for just, it had guts. It was about moving on. It was about like, let's do something new and fresh. Let's explore the galaxy. Let's democratize the Force, you have the little kids with the Force powers, and it's kind of indicated like there's this whole new young generation that's, it gives me
Force
goosebumps.
sensitive characters. Yeah. Force sensitive characters. Yeah.
It gives me goosebumps because it kind of takes it away. Like, instead of taking the chosen one approach, which is what, all of the movies prior to this took, it sort of took this idea of like, no, the Force, Luke says it himself when he's giving Rey the lesson. He says the Force isn't just the purview of the Jedi,
Mm-hmm.
It's for everybody. And I feel like, that's a really good interpretation of like why the Jedi were so blind, and why they had the hubris they had, and why they handled things poorly, is because it became this like protected thing of the Jedi Order, or of the Jedi Council, instead of, I guess the religious analogy there would be like, you got to share the gospel, right? You got to give the good news to everybody in the galaxy, about the Force. So, in that respect, it's my favorite of the sequel trilogy. I respect Rian Johnson so much he had something to say with it. And then the themes, James talked about Luke Skywalker as a stand-in for the fan. Had never thought of that. That's brilliant. But the themes of this movie in particular, about letting the past die. And when Kylo Ren says, kill it, let the past die, kill it,
Yeah.
And this movie, more than any other Star Wars movie, I've cried through this when I watched this movie, because to me, it represents like a mourning process, or a grieving process for everything Star Wars that came before it. And my finally being like of an age and of a, pardon me if this is oversharing, but like finally being like of an age and of a temperament and maybe a maturity level to be like, you know what? Like, it was a wonderful experience. I'm ready for Star Wars to be something new. It doesn't always have to be the thing that I grew up with, or the way I wanted the original trilogy, or the way I wanted the prequels to be, and that they weren't that way. I had always been so precious about Star Wars, and this was the movie that finally let me go, it's okay. Like, it really gave me a sense of peace about Star Wars. Like, whatever comes after this, is fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I was super excited to see what we would get in the final movie, because I really wanted to see these themes continue, and of course they weren't. But we'll talk about that soon.
Yeah. That was my only gripe with The Last Jedi, was the fact that Luke wasn't the Luke Skywalker that I grew up loving as a child. This guy who was full of hope, in the face of darkness, he didn't blink. He stayed the course. He almost lost it, but he stayed the course and stayed on the light side. And not only did he stay on the light side and defeat the Emperor, he was able to pull his father back out from the dark side and bring him back to the light moments before he died, which was a great, arc for Darth Vader. And I was kind of hoping for the same thing here for Last Jedi with Rey. I was hoping Rey would get him out of that rut, and she kind of did, but not really. And but it still, for me, it made up for it in that scene when Luke returns and he fights the ATT walkers, and then of course we find out that he wasn't there. He just projected himself, which I thought was freaking out of this. I love that. I know everyone crapped
so
on that.
It's so cool.
Yeah, but it was the best part of the movie for me. I was like, wow, that is awesome. He's so badass that he could project himself and fool everybody. That is cool. Right. I wish it was in person. I wish we could see him, doing the flips and whatnot. But I get it. I get why Rian Johnson chose to do it, because, like Sean said, he wanted to try something new. He wanted to do something different, and this was it. This is what I wanted. I don't know about everyone else. And another thing that I liked about the movie is we got to see Leia use her Force powers, which was fantastic. I love that scene. Everyone online hated that scene because, of course, it didn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, it's like, no, dude, they established in Jedi that she is also a Force sensitive character because she's the sister of, Luke Skywalker, the daughter of Anakin Skywalker. So yeah, she would know how to use the Force in her own way, not in the old Jedi way, but her own way for good, right?
Julio, I think you mean the Mary Poppins scene.
Yeah.
It's pretty goofy the way it's shot, but it's a little goofy the way it's shot, but it's sincere, and it does work. It wins me over.
Yeah, it worked for me because, like I said, there's only so much time, in the movie, so they can't really explain how she was able to learn all that. It would have been nice to have a what do you call it? A flashback scene. That would have been nice, to have a flashback scene where maybe she remembers the time when she was training with Luke, and maybe Luke could have taught her, like, look, you could find your own way with the Force. You don't have to go by the old Jedi code, that kind of thing. So that way the audience could have had a I guess a different perspective on it, but of course, for whatever reason, it didn't happen that way. And but other than that, like I thought this movie was the right direction. I left the theater thinking, you know what, this was it. This is exactly what I was looking for in the new Star Wars movie. Let's go a different direction. Let the past die, like the Kylo Ren, that line from Kylo Ren, kill off this Palpatine wannabe character. Let Kylo Ren be the guy to lead this new empire that he wants to lead, and let him fall on his own. And I like you, Sean, I was really excited for the third one. I was like, all right, let's hope they build off this. Let's hope they bring Rian Johnson back for the third one, but they didn't because freaking producers, man, they're so fickle. They freak out the moment they see people complaining about a film. It's like, dude, so what? It's not your job. Your job is to make sure the story is continues the way it does, so that way the audience can come back. And they totally retracted everything in the Rise of Skywalker. So, you have any final thoughts before we move on to the Rise of Skywalker, Sean? Sounds like you do.
I have one final thought about Luke, which is
go ahead.
At the end of
let's not forget Yoda came back in this movie too, which was also fantastic. And that was fantastic. And
not only Yoda, but like classic a Yoda who's being humorous in a way we haven't seen him be humorous since Empire Strikes Back, but also who has all the wisdom of the Return of the Jedi and prequel Yoda.
That was spot on.
So good. Yeah, the way they did Yoda, obviously Frank Oz comes back. I love how he's kind of like just messing with Luke and laughing at him. Like, oh yeah, you think this tree is so important. But yeah, so I was just going to mention at the end of Jedi, we really get a Luke Skywalker when he throws his saber down and he says, no, I won't fight you. You know, I'm a Jedi. But in proclaiming he's a Jedi, he throws his weapon down almost to say he. So there's this sense, you know, and then the sense of peace that Luke has at the end of Jedi, which is like, you know, the nub nub chub chub song, which I can do a rendition of if you want. But the peace that he has in that final scene when he sees the Force ghosts of Obi-Wan Kenobi and of his father and of Yoda. I mean, it's so powerful. And like, and you kind of get this sense that Luke has achieved this peace, and he's almost like a pacifist Jedi now. Like he's kind of above by throwing his weapon down and just sacrificing himself in the way he did. It just makes him seem even more noble. Like he's almost like he's moved to a different level of being a Jedi.
Yeah.
Where he doesn't have to fight anymore. You know what I mean? So yeah, like, you know, and that's not the way they took him in this movie. But yeah, I had one other thought, but I can't remember what it was. So
James, I think it looked like you had one more thought.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts. Just talking about Luke and Luke being a little bit more of a pacifist. Technically, we don't really see him do anything in this movie more than just meditate on a rock. He doesn't really wield a lightsaber in it, and it kind of speaks to this idea that as a, you know, wizened old master, he is using his powers. He's using his brain. He's using his mind to defeat Kylo, basically to defeat the First Order. And in defeating them, he says early in the movie, you know, do you expect me to face down the First Order with a laser sword? And it kind of foreshadows at the end that he does that. And then he survives that, you know, barrage of blasts where Kylo's doing the more, you know, and it's so great. And it's incredible because, like, the whole idea is that Luke is outsmarting Kylo and just giving what's left of the Resistance enough time to get away. And Luke realizes that that's the only reason, that's the best way that he could give his life. It's the best way that he could sacrifice himself, is to give them a little bit of time and then hopefully inspire the galaxy. You know, which we see at the end with Broom Boy. And we were all Broom Boy at one point. You know, I remember sweeping up the backyard and listening to Star Wars music and pretending it was a lightsaber. So yeah, and also before we move on, because this show is called Talking Cinema, I got to point out how cinematic this movie looks.
Yes,
you brought up some pictures. The use of like the color red on crate on the salty ground, and the way the red picks up is just beautiful. All of the stuff on the island, scene. The throne room scene is incredible. The shot, like the moment where Kylo kills Snoke, and then it goes slow-mo for a second, and then they face off with the guards, is one of my all-time favorite Star Wars moments. It's just such a great, unexpected moment that also pays off so many things I've wanted to see characters do with a lightsaber. It's incredible. It's fantastic.
And the fact that...
Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
Well, just the fact you said it pays off all these things. It pays off that relationship between Rey and Kylo that's been building throughout the film.
Yeah.
And to see them in league with one another, at least for like 10 minutes, you know, it doesn't last long, but to see them like sort of finding a common enemy in that moment, and you not knowing what's going to come next, that was, you know, that's like, whoa, like, what's going to happen next? Like, this is crazy, you know?
It felt like we were in uncharted territory, which like The Force Awakens never did. And as much as I like that film, I will say, like, never once in The Force Awakens did I necessarily feel surprised. The Last Jedi was the film where I was like, I don't even know where this movie's going.
Yeah.
Like, I really feel like we're feeling around in the dark, and it made me feel the way I felt watching the original trilogy, like the closest thing to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could say there's parallels there to Empire Strikes Back. You know, they're on the run from the Resistance, or excuse me, from the First Order, etc. But it's not like structured like Empire Strikes Back. The way the other two movies in this trilogy are structured after A New Hope and Return of the Jedi.
Right.
Who was disappointed with this character right here?
Oh, dude, she went out like Boba Fett. She went out like a punk.
Yeah.
I had so much expectation for this character. She looked great. She had a great look.
Yeah.
Looked badass, and I was hoping to see her do some damage, and she didn't, and it was very disappointing, extremely disappointing.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, so that's I just wanted to mention that because I saw this picture and I was like, you know what, man, this she had a great look, the cape, how tall she was too. She was freaking enormous, and nothing came about her. It would have been great to see her side by side with Kylo as like a number 2. You know, that would have been awesome, but it didn't happen that way for whatever reason. But
isn't that classic
nice.
Star Wars though? Like to introduce a character that looks great, looks iconic, and then give them like a really stupid.
I think that's what
maybe John was saying,
it was a wink.
But
yeah, maybe it was a wink. Like, hey guys, here's another Boba Fett, but we're gonna do the same thing we did with Boba Fett, which is totally just disregard that. But that was a mistake, in my opinion, a huge mistake. Guada Cinema says hello, Guada Cinema. Hola, ¿cómo estás?
And I want to say Brian Wood said R.I.P. Nub Nub Chub Chub.
Let me see. I think I have one more. I was gonna say one more thing about it, but I can't. Nope, I lost it. Any last thoughts before we move on to the crap show that was The Rise of Skywalker?
Only that, yeah. Last Jedi was a really dope movie. That's the last.
It was. It was.
Yeah, I agree.
I think a lot of people. I don't know why it got so much hate that it did. Maybe because a lot of fans did not expect it to go this direction, but I thought it was the right direction, and I thought Disney should have just stuck to their guns and just says, "Here we're going to go here," and that's it. That's all we're going to go to it. But they got scared. They blinked. They stared into the abyss that is the Star Wars fandom, and they blinked.
They had that reaction. They had that reaction.
That reaction right there, exactly. They went, "Oh no, what are we gonna do? Ah, JJ, save us, JJ!"
That's also one of the funniest moments in any Star Wars movie is when the Porg like slams up against the windshield.
There it is. Here, I wanted to find a picture of the room.
They look
here,
incredible. It looks so.
It was fantastic. Yeah, that whole scene was fantastic, and it's just a shame that they didn't. You know, as huge and powerful as Disney is, I was really surprised that they actually balked, and not balked. They actually were shook.
Yeah, they balked. Yeah,
they balked. Is that okay? Yeah. They balked at the enormous amount of negative, fans' response, but they could have, like I said, they could have just stuck to the guns and just say, okay, for the third movie, we're going to build on what Rian Johnson introduced, and we're going to take it. But we didn't. That didn't happen. So we got the Rise of Skywalker. Oh,
really quick, if I may, I just wanted to point out too. Sean mentioned the Porg up against the windshield, and it reminded me. We've all been on the original version of Star Tours, right?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Okay. The that whole sequence, I listened to the Rian Johnson commentary, and he said that he based that sequence off of the ride. So going through those crystals and everything.
Yeah.
And when he mentioned that, I was suddenly like, it brought back all those memories of the original Star Tours ride, and he used a lot of the same music and stuff. And anyway, I thought that was a really interesting callback to something that I know that was huge for me as a kid. I
noticed that the similarity visually there, but I didn't know that he was intentionally doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Brian Wood just said, I have a weak spot for Babu Frick. So do I. Man, Brian, you and I on the same wavelength tonight.
Yeah.
Brian's a fan. Brian is a fan too. For those watching later on or right now, Brian is a good friend of ours, and he is also a fan. So I could understand why he has that sentiment for Babu Frick. Comments? So, Rise of Skywalker. Woo, man. Talk about trying to stuff the turkey, right? Trying to overstuffing it into one movie and hoping it pay off. Sean, let's start with you. What are your first thoughts? What are your overall thoughts of the Star Wars Rise of Skywalker film? Did you think J.J. Abrams? Did you think it was a mistake having Disney bring back J.J. Abrams, or do you think they should have taken the old classical route of like, you know what, let's get a third director here and let's have the writer build off what Rian Johnson built? Do you think it was a mistake that they pretty much retracted everything and just started from fresh again? You know, what are your thoughts?
Well, you never know the inner workings of why. Like Colin Trevorrow was attached to this movie, and
That's right. That's right. He was.
And then he was. I think he went through a couple iterations of the screenplay, maybe with a co-writer, and then Disney and he parted ways. You never know why those things happen.
Well, wasn't it because his film flopped? Didn't he have a film come out and it flopped, and then they kind of got
Book of Henry? Yeah.
And then they got scared and they went, oh, you know what? Maybe we're going to go with someone else who's more successful than you. That's my guess.
Right. No, that very well could be. I mean, but that's kind of surprising after Jurassic World and, you know, because like, you know, which of those two movies, Jurassic World or Book of Henry, is more similar to Star Wars? You know, like does it take a chance? But anyway, you don't know why these things happen necessarily, but I was very disappointed, not because I love or I'm super like a big Colin Trevorrow fanboy. I like his movies, but just because I wanted to see another director and a younger director, you know, someone of his generation, tackle this. And again, once Rian Johnson made, you know, it's funny, I can never think of the names of these sequel movies. Last Jedi. After he made Last Jedi, that's why I was saying, like, I was ready to move on. I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. What's Colin Trevorrow got? I want to see it, you know? And then for them to sort of be like, oh, you know what? No, we're going to be safe and we're going to go back to JJ and we're going to let him kind of take this home. Because that was around the time, like after Last Jedi, it seemed like they were getting scared, you know, like,
they were.
And they were trying to play it safe. And that was, you know, also, I don't know where Solo fits in that timeline, but, you know, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were slotted they were directing Solo, right? And then they got fired and they brought in Ron Howard. And Ron Howard, it's funny. As someone who I love Ron Howard, but like you can't get any safer than Ron Howard.
Yeah,
you know, if you're like looking for just the safest director to take over a Star Wars movie. So it just seemed like they were really playing it safe there. They were playing it safe here. And again, after Last Jedi, I was ready for them to not play it safe. I just wanted new, fresh stories, ideas, filmmakers. Like, when Disney bought Star Wars, I was looking forward to like this idea of like, you know, because originally they were like, we're going to give this to so many like newer filmmakers, new generation of filmmakers. Yeah, JJ will do the first one, but then we'll do, you know, Rian Johnson the next one. We'll get Colin Trevorrow. We'll get Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. Like it seemed really exciting, you know. And I was even like, maybe we'll see like we could see a Star Wars sitcom. We could see a Star Wars, you know, soap opera. Like anything's possible. Like you could see Star Wars branch into all these like genres, you know.
And they are with Disney Plus, but in the cinematic universe, you know, you really can't go too far with those.
But like with Solo, and I don't mean to digress too much about this, but like with Solo, it was like Phil Lord, Christopher Miller. Those two guys are like two of the funniest comedy directors like working. Their movies are hilarious. Those guys are hilarious. So it's like, cool, we're going to see like a Star Wars comedy starring Han Solo. That's like the best idea I've ever heard, you know?
Yeah.
Now I haven't even talked about this movie that we're talking about, which is, you know, basically the way I felt about this movie.
See this picture right there?
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to happen to me after I watched this movie.
You want Babu Frick to play with your brain?
Yeah, I was like, please get this out of my brain. But go ahead, Sean. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to.
No, I'll just say my summary of this movie is it was insanely paced. They tried to squeeze so much into it. It was redundant and derivative. It was disappointing. I don't know. I think I'm going to let you guys fill in the shades because I have a hard time articulating this movie and all of my sort of gripes with it. But it really like, of all of these new movies, it really broke my heart the most. It was like, it was like, okay, I have it. And then I'm going to throw it to James. I promise. This is how I felt about it, was like, really, after 40 years and 9 of these movies, this is how you're going to go out? Like, we deserve better. We deserve better than this. Like, Star Wars deserves better than this. George deserves better than this. Like, with the Avengers movies and the Russo brothers, they made Infinity War and they made Endgame, and they were trying to tie together like 23 prior movies in this huge cinematic universe. And Disney gave them like 5.5 hours of movie to tie all of this cinematic universe together. And it was brilliant. They did a great job tying it all together. They gave every character the moment they should have given them. It had closure for characters. It had growth for characters. It had, it had emotion, it had humor, it had everything. That's what we needed out of this movie. We needed like a movie that could have tied together 40 years and 9 films of a saga that is interspersed generation after generation. And instead we got something that was, that felt too frenetically paced, maybe even rushed, maybe rewritten to the point of nonsense. I don't.
Yeah, Finn Space says it all right here.
I'm going to throw it to James. I'm not being very articulate about this, but
no. You. I think you have the right idea. You used the word disappointed. That's the perfect word to describe the Rise of Skywalker, because there's so much potential here that they could have built off what Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi, and they didn't. They like we said, they got scared, they panicked. And so when you panic, what happens? You make mistakes. And this was the huge mistake that they made with the Rise of Skywalker. But go ahead, James. What are your thoughts on the Rise of Skywalker?
Well, it's interesting. All of the things that you guys said are valid. And one of the weird things about this movie that I just can't really understand is why this film had to come out in 2019. When the star of your sequel dies in 2016, when the whole idea behind your 9th film that was supposed to tie the trilogy and the series together, when the star, the central character, dies, maybe, I don't know, like say, hey, we're delaying a year so that we can go back and rework this to make sure that this is the best movie that it possibly could be. But I think that this is where you run into the problem of having, the biggest movie studio in the world and the most successful corporation. These movies have dates that they have to fulfill. They have to fulfill coming out when they're scheduled to come out. They have to make shareholders happy. And because of that, there had to be a Star Wars Episode 9 in late 2019. And I think that when Carrie Fisher died, the way that they did the movies in development, Rian Johnson was too tied up with finishing The Last Jedi to be able to sign on for a sequel. And I have to imagine that they approached Rian Johnson about it, but he said, hey, I want to do my own films. I want to do my own trilogy. And they announced before The Last Jedi came out that Rian Johnson was going to have his own trilogy of films that were going to take place outside of the Skywalker saga. And so they showed a lot of confidence that they had in this product that they were going to release. And then with Rise of Skywalker, they had let Colin Trevorrow go after Carrie Fisher died. And so I think for them, they felt like, okay, the safest bet here is J.J. Abrams, who I am just speculating here, probably promised, hey, I'm gonna basically catch the same lightning in a bottle that I did with The Force Awakens, and I'm gonna make you guys a great film, and it's gonna be satisfying. And everything I've heard about the making of this movie is that it was kind of a nightmare to make. They were basically writing it while they were making it. They reshot a ton of stuff. I've heard that Daisy Ridley didn't even know that she was a Palpatine during production, that it was something that came up to her, I think, during reshoots.
No.
So
Oh God.
all of this is to say that I feel like even like making fun of this movie or mocking this movie or anything is like, I don't know, like kicking the movie when it's down. The movie was like not a success. No one likes this movie. I feel like J.J. Abrams tried to make a movie that would make everyone happy, that would make people that hated The Last Jedi happy, people that loved The Last Jedi happy, people that had issues with The Force Awakens. He was trying to make Star Wars fans happy. His attempt was to basically unite the fandom and make everyone happy, and he made a movie that made nobody happy. And this is absolutely the worst Star Wars movie ever made, and that I have to say.
Oh
yeah, he made the mistake that every writer has ever said, is that don't write for the satisfaction of the reader. Write a story that you enjoy, because if you write a story that you enjoy, the readers will enjoy it as well, because you put so much heart and effort into it. And I think that's what happened here. He tried to satisfy everyone, and you can't win them all. That's a common factor. Yeah. When you write anything or produce anything, you cannot win everyone. You can win as many people as you can, but you can't win them all. And this picture right here sums up, in just how much they totally disregarded what Rian Johnson introduced in The Last Jedi, which is Kylo Ren going back, and he actually just glued together the helmet that he broke in Last Jedi when he proclaimed, kill the past, let's move on. But nope, they had to go back to it because Hollywood is so full of egos that I just saw this as an ego tripping move by J.J. Abrams. You ruined something that I created, so I'm going to bring it back because I made that. You didn't make that. So it was just, the whole movie was just a mess. It didn't keep me vested. I didn't care at this point. There's no feeling. Cinema, as you guys know, is supposed to make you feel something. No matter what it is. It could be a drama. It could be a romance story. It could be a sci-fi. It could be whatever, a thriller. They got to make you feel something emotional wise. And the original trilogy, you felt something for the characters. You felt compassion for them. You felt hate towards them. You felt, just whatever the case may be. That's good cinema. These movies, with the exception of The Last Jedi, for my own personal opinion, they had no feeling at all. I didn't feel anything. And that's a failure when it comes to when you watch a film. If a film doesn't make you feel something, it failed, in my opinion. You could be cerebral. You can make a cerebral film, like a David Lynch, for instance. But even with David Lynch, I still feel something when I watch his films. Because David Lynch still understands what cinema is supposed to be. And this last movie, which is supposed to be the last of the three of the trilogy, right? The new trilogy, it was supposed to make you feel satisfied, like, oh, fine, our heroes made it. We're all good, but it didn't feel that way. It felt flat. Even the fact that they brought back Emperor Palpatine. What do you guys think of that, by the way? What do you guys think of them bringing back not Emperor? Yeah, Emperor Palpatine, right? That was
Yeah,
right. That's
it's
okay.
It's not what I wanted, but I don't know. I hope the fans are happy.
When I saw the trailer and you hear Palpatine's cackle, I actually thought, you know what? That's a good move. Like in some ways, this series of films to bring back Palpatine kind of makes it about Palpatine in a lot of ways, because he's such a looming presence in the first three, obviously, and in the original trilogy. Like he's a good way to, if you're trying to find a way to tie it all together, I think it's a good move. But we heard him cackle in the trailer over that image of like the ruins of the Death Star. And my imagination ran wild of like, how is he still alive? Is his spirit, inhabiting these ruins? Or is it like what was the thing in Harry Potter, the Horcrux, right? That contains the soul of Voldemort. Like I thought it was going to be something maybe like that. Like, and I was kind of excited about some of those possibilities. But then the way they brought him back to be like, psych,
Yeah.
it was like it was, and I think the way they brought him back then in the way they used him was very disappointing. And I didn't mind the idea of bringing him back, but I minded the way it was executed. In particular, he is a performer, as an actor, Ian McDiarmid. I mean, he owns those first movies. Like in episode 3 is like his movie, like he
definitely.
and Return of the Jedi. I mean, he's so powerful and as a performer in that role. And I felt like he was brought back in this movie and just so poorly used, and it was just, it felt more like a gimmick, and it didn't feel like a fleshed out, again, a continuance of his character and who he is. You know what I mean? It just felt like we needed a baddie. Snoke's dead. Let's bring this guy back. Say he's a clone. Give him a bunch of like ghost followers who sit in the stands and cheer for him, even though they don't do anything. It just didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it made no sense at all.
It's not just that it didn't make any sense. It feels like it kind of, like, my biggest issue with this movie isn't just that it's supposed to be the culmination of this trilogy, but it was sold as being the film that would tie all the trilogies together. And it's almost as if, like, in doing so, like, the idea was to just cheapen the impact of the entire series, like by having it be that, like, basically, I think Brian had brought up in his comment that that he felt like he didn't feel like anything was different after Return of the Jedi, and after this film, like, my biggest takeaway is like, okay, we're back where we started.
Yeah,
like I feel like I have less than I had before, instead of feeling like I have more. I don't feel like I had a rich experience. I actually feel like I lost something here. I feel like you made, like, if I'm to factor in what happened in this film as being part of the broader canon, then you just cheapened the impact of the original trilogy. And you just made so much of Palpatine basically laying all this groundwork that he was doing in the prequels. My favorite aspect of the prequels is looking at them through his perspective. And I feel like Rise of Skywalker cheapens all of that. The only film I can think of to compare this movie to is the James Bond film Spectre, which tried to tie the other Daniel Craig movies together through these, like, really, like, half-baked retcons of saying, like, oh, it was all a bigger part of, like, the villain's plan, that, like, oh, he was the person that the one who orchestrated everything that came before, even though it was obviously a retcon and it was never actually planned that way. And that's what this whole entire movie feels like, is like somebody had a lightning bolt moment and thought they had this great idea, but really at the end of the day, they were just undermining their entire story and the entire franchise at large. And it just, like, I don't like being that fan that says, like, oh, I hate this movie, I wish it didn't exist. But this is, like, the only one where I'm like, I feel like it should be stricken from the record. Like, it actually, like, if it were just a bad movie, I'd be like, okay, whatever. But the fact that it actually kind of ruins what came before is a real bummer. And yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of this movie.
Yeah, this is a great example of too many cooks in the kitchen. A great example of being scared and working under the fear of, oh my God, we don't want the fans to be mad at us. When in reality, sorry, dude, that's the reality of the situation. You're not gonna win, like I said earlier, you're not gonna win them all. So just make the movie that's gonna be good and entertaining, and the people will flock to it. Most people will flock to a good story. That's all I think overall. They just wanted to see a semblance of the old trilogy, but introduce new elements into it. And they did that with the new characters, but they just failed to deliver and execute a new story and move the story forward. I think that's what killed it. Yeah. They refused to move the story forward, and that's what destroyed the new trilogy, because myself, I'm just speaking for myself. I wanted to see the New Republic. I wanted to see, Han Solo's children as teenagers. I wanted to see Luke Skywalker in his academy. And if they wanted to give us the whole story about how his academy was destroyed, that's great. That could have been part of the trilogy. How he lost his academy. Maybe in the Force Awakens, maybe we could have seen Kylo Ren, destroy the school and go, oh crap, dude, oh my god, what's gonna happen next? That could have worked for me. But for whatever reason, and then especially I think honestly Kathleen Kennedy must be tone deaf, because the interview she gave about, oh, we had nothing to work on. There was nothing, that was already created, so we had to create it from scratch. I was like, really? There's Timothy Zahn's novels, there's comics. You had so many avenues to pick from.
Well, there was also Lucas's templates, his outlines.
There you go.
He had outlines that he handed to Disney when he sold the franchise, and they were like, "Oh, we're not doing this. We're throwing that away." And it's like, okay, cool. If you're going to do that, and if you're going to distance yourself from like all of of the original of the prequel trilogy, and try to distance yourself from what Lucas had brought to the franchise in the 2000s. You better make a great movie, because if you make a disappointing movie, then everyone's going to be like it makes it even worse, because like you basically called your shot and said, oh, like this Star Wars is bad, we're making something better, and then like everyone hates your movie. Like I feel like in a way like George Lucas kind of had the last laugh here.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think one reason I'm being self-reflective, I think one reason I have a hard time being articulate about this movie, my likes and dislikes, mostly my dislikes, is because with time, I always gain more perspective on these things. And like the prequel trilogy, for instance, I feel like I've come to a better appreciation of them in the last few years, because these sequel movies have come out. And I imagine in 10 years, I'll probably feel differently about, or at least a little differently about, The Rise of Skywalker than I do now, because it'll be just more time to reflect and everything. But all that to say, I agree with James that George had the last laugh, because I found myself, it's kind of like when, not to get political, but a lot of people complained about President Trump, and there was that, you'd see occasionally those little funny memes or whatever of George W. Bush, and it would say, "Miss me,"
Right.
And like that's kind of how I felt about George Lucas in these new movies, which was about, especially once Rise of Skywalker came out, I was like, I miss George. I really wanted, I would have liked to have seen as many times as I griped about the prequels, and as many misgivings as I had over the years with them. I've really come to appreciate them a lot more, and I would have really loved to have seen George Lucas's sequel trilogy, or at least them build on his ideas, because as we discussed before, he always brought something new. George didn't want to retread. He didn't want to take A New Hope and make a template and create that for the prequels. He wanted to do something new each time, new planets, new characters, new themes. And I have so much more respect now, and it's saying a lot. I've always had a huge amount of respect for George Lucas, but I have an even greater amount of respect for him. And in that way, I'm kind of grateful for the sequel trilogy to have given me that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of in a nutshell, like, because when I was watching the film last night, and I kind of went back thinking, like, oh, he isn't so bad too. This movie terrible like this so much, and it just so happens that I think the most offensive part of the film, and kind of the thing that defines what I hate about this movie so much, is what happens at the very end when Chewie gets his award, which to me is like the most patronizing and condescending thing you can do to fans. Is like, oh, you picked up on some like bullshit thing that you saw online about people not liking that Chewie didn't get a medal in A New Hope. So you're like bringing that full circle in a way that has like no context. There's nothing to explain that except like outside of the film, like, oh, that's the thing that fans talked about, and hey, we listened and we rectified that. I mean, and that also is like right? That scene is like very close to the scene where Lando is either hitting on a younger girl or the girl turns out to be his daughter. Like, I don't know what is going on in that scene, but it is such a glaring scene that sticks out like a sore thumb. That's like, what is this scene? Why is it here? What is going on here? Am I hallucinating? This movie's terrible.
There's scenes like that and moments like that in the movie. For instance, when Finn says, "Rey, I have to tell you something," and he never tells her.
It's never paid off. This
where you're
movie
just
is
like,
all set off. It's all set up with no payoff, or it's all payoff with no setup. It's incredible.
Wow, that's a mic drop comment, James.
Yeah,
that's an amazing insight.
Thanks.
Brian says, in the end, I'm mad at Disney. There was no plan. The movies are basically giving the finger to each other. They had no respect for this universe or characters. Felt like tons of ego. I was totally willing to go in new, unexpected directions too, but we went in no direction. Right on the head, Brian. Right on the head. You're absolutely right. This is a prime example of someone giving you a platter of delicious, full, like freshly baked cinnamon rolls, fresh from the oven. Delicious, deliciousness, right? Handing it over to you, and someone taking it, put it on the ground, squatting over it, and crapping all over it. That's what it felt like to me that Disney did to Star Wars, because George Lucas handed them. It's like he handed them gold easily. Like, dude, how could you mess up Star Wars? There's no way you can mess up Star Wars. And then James, since you mentioned that he gave outlines, and they totally disregarded it. That just pisses me off even more. The fact that they were, they could have at least said, okay, we'll look at them and we'll take what we like, and then we'll build off that, and then we'll throw away whatever we don't like. They could have done that too, but they didn't. They went a totally different direction, and it did not at all pay off at all, with the exception of The Last Jedi, in my opinion.
Well, that's the weird thing about The Last Jedi is that the rumor that I've heard. Apparently Lucas won't. Oh yeah, Brian's comment.
Well, let's find out.
Yeah.
Well,
so
what have
Lucas,
we?
He famously went on record and said that he didn't like The Force Awakens, and I think in Bob Iger's autobiography, he mentioned screening the film to Lucas for the first time, and Lucas's reaction was just like, there's nothing new here. There's no new ideas. He's like, say what you will about my films. At least I tried to introduce something new with every single movie.
Exactly.
And so I think at that point, he'd made some comments that made him sort of unpopular with Disney. And so he just stopped talking about Star Wars. But I've heard that apparently he reached out to Rian Johnson and kind of let him know that wow, your movie actually did challenge the Star Wars universe and the Star Wars franchise in a way that he thought was compelling, and that was the one that he actually liked of the three. So
I'm not surprised. Because, like we mentioned, the reason why we all liked, or love, I should say, Last Jedi is because that's exactly what Star Wars is supposed to do. It's supposed to push forward. Yeah. Let's move on. Let's see what we can do. Let's explore. Let's find out what else is out there. And I mean, they could have gone in so many different directions, and for whatever reason, they think this is my major gripe about Hollywood in general. The producers in Hollywood, for the most part, not all of them, but for the most part, they really do think audiences are stupid. They really do.
Yeah,
they think that, oh, you're so dumb. Let's just give them something that's safe, and and they'll accept it. And the reality is that no, that's not the case. A lot of fans are like us. They want to see something fresh. They want to see something new. They want to see something that's never been explored before. And I think Last Jedi was the right way, but they totally screwed it up with the Rise of Skywalker. So yeah, overall, this is a prime example of how a major corporation messes up something like Star Wars. And it's a tried and true perspective, in my opinion anyway, that you got to let the artists be artists, and the business people, the marketing people, the advertising people should just take a step back and just let the artists do what they do best, and that's create. create, and let them figure it out on their own, because they're fans too. I'm sure a lot of people involved in these pictures were fans of the old Star Wars. And The Mandalorian, the reason why The Mandalorian has been such a big hit to the point where it's outshined the trilogy is because Jon Favreau, his fanboyness oozes through the show. Like you can see it, you can feel it. Like he loves Star Wars, and he wanted to bring back that feeling, and that's why The Mandalorian has been such a huge hit, because it brought back the feeling of Star Wars. Even though there was no Jedi in the first season, no Jedi whatsoever, but everyone loved it because, like I said, Favreau just understood. No, this is what Star Wars needs to be, like this. And so I'm happy that he was able to do it. I was happy that Disney allowed him to do it the way he wanted to do it. And so now I'm hoping he gets to a hold of the movies. I really do. But we'll see. I guess we'll see when that time comes, when they start making those films. I have this video up. I wanted to share it with you guys, because I think is a pretty funny video. So I'm gonna play it. It's only 5 minutes long. If you guys don't mind, I'll play a little clip of it, and then we'll call it a night.
Skywalker, he's gonna be the one who rises. Oh, he better not. Luke better rise, or I quit. I think you better prepare yourself, my friend. It's like Snoke said, darkness rises, and Hayden Christensen to meet it. You gentlemen are completely ignoring the current cast. The rise of Skywalker is going to have completely different meaning. How? After Ben and Rey defeat Palps, no offense, Rey is going to call the next Jedi Order Skywalkers. That way, she is a Skywalker without actually being related to any. That's dumb. I agree.
I think Rey is actually going to be a Skywalker. It just makes more sense to make Rey and Ben family.
But Rey is going to turn evil. I saw her new Darth Maul saber. That was probably just a vision. You don't know.
I bet. Well, Rey had that vision where she saw 1 million copies of herself. I bet Palpatine over there is cloning a bunch of Reys so he can have an endless supply of apprentices.
We do know Palpatine is obsessed with clones. I wouldn't be surprised if he's Rey's father. Yes, and I could totally see JJ trying to steal that "I'm your father" line for his movie like he did in Star Trek with... You think Palps is going to say "I'm your father"? JJ is too much of a Falcon fanboy. He's more likely to give the "I'm your father" moment to Lando.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. What else do you think is going to happen with Palpatine's grand return?
I think he's going to get his butt handed to him by a bunch of Force ghosts.
Careful, Trekkie. Before the butt handed to you is yours.
I'm simply evaluating the data. In most massive stories, there is always a moment where the cavalry arrives just when all hope is lost. The riot of the Relief, T-Rex of Jurassic Park.
Oh, the Avengers portal scene in Endgame. Remember that, Thanos?
Too soon, man. It's a crowd necessary to defeat an impossible foe.
I'm not going to be defeated. It is the third installment of this trilogy. Yes. I do believe you are toast, Palps. That is ridiculous. I succeeded at the end of the first trilogy. Depends on what you consider the first trilogy. They thought I was dead at the end of the next trilogy. But surprise, guess who's back? Back again. Palps is back. And who will succeed again?
That would have been a cool twist.
There's going to be this epic moment where Rey and Ben are almost dead, and then we're going to hear someone say some quotable line like, "Rey, on your left," and then Ghost Luke will and Obi-Wan, then more Jedi, then Qui-Gon Jinn, and then Anakin. Shut up, all of you. And you go away. No, I won't let that happen. It is inevitable. It is your destiny. They're going to pull the dark side right out of you and throw it back from whence it came. I think you're getting your stories mixed, but that does sound exciting. You unloyal sack of fools! How dare you root against me instead of support my quest for galactic domination? Oh, I'm afraid
synthetic theories will all be obliterated when episode 9 arrives. I will rule this galaxy, and I will destroy all who stand in my way.
That sounds awesome. Yes, we totally support you.
Team shit.
Don't destroy anything you want, man.
Everyone except Poe. If you hurt Poe, I will destroy you myself.
I get it.
I want to share that with you because I thought that was hilarious. So that brings the end of our Star Wars. The 3 weeks of Star Wars. We started with the prequels, and we started with the original trilogy, and then we just finished up with the Disney Star Wars trilogy. So, for next week, before you got on the show, James, Sean and I were talking about next week's show. What do you think about doing Back to the Future for next week's show?
100% in.
All right. So next week, we'll be discussing the Back to the Future trilogy, Back to the Future Part 2, and Back to the Future Part 3. All directed and written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. Is that correct, James?
Mm-hmm.
All the same writers throughout the whole series?
Yeah, right.
Trilogy?
You should be asking Sean.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm definitely asking Sean that because I wouldn't know.
Yes.
But yeah, so next week we're going to be talking about the Back to the Future. So you could join us on that show because Back to the Future it still has a lot of influence in pop culture as well, almost in the same level as Star Wars. Not as up there, but close, because during the anniversary, I just remember how huge. Like I had no idea how big it was until what was it? The 20th anniversary show, the 25th anniversary of the movie's
35th,
release,
right?
So
It was the
35th.
The original came out in 85, so 95, 05. Yeah, 35th.
35th. Wow.
Would you guys like to know, according to Sean P. Malone, what the 4 best movies of all time are?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it. In no particular order: Back to the Future, Back to the Future Part 2, Lawrence of Arabia, and Back to the Future Part 3.
Yeah, it's disappointing that Part 3 didn't quite live up to Lawrence of Arabia, but they tried.
Like whenever people ask me what my favorite movie is, I struggle because my film snobby answer is Lawrence of Arabia, but like the answer from my heart, is the Back to the Future trilogy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
then what I'm going to do I'm going to do something different next week. Next week, since I know how huge of a Back to the Future fan you are, Sean. So next week, I'm going to have you host the show. And then James and I will be co-hosts for next week's episode for Talking Cinema. Because you are the walking, talking encyclopedia of Back to the Future. You know almost everything about it. You could quote it line by line. You and I have talked constantly sometimes for hours about Back to the Future at the office we work at. So yeah, next week you will for 1 week only. Sean Malone will be the host of Talking Cinema, and then James and I will be your co-host, and you will lead the charge for the trilogy, and we'll take it from there. How about that? How's that sound?
That sounds great. And if we're playing the Degrees of Kevin Bacon game with Star Wars and Back to the Future, in other words, how do you connect the two? All you have to say is, "My name is Darth Vader."
Yeah. There you go. From the planet Vulcan.
I am an extraterrestrial from the planet Vulcan.
So that's going to be a good show. We're going to talk, the cinematic influence of Back to the Future, which was a great film on its own. And with that said, I would like everyone here to know that Sean P. Malone is a talented cinematographer in his own right. And so I would like to plug his website. Sean, would you like to tell people about your website and what you do as a director of photography, and I'll scroll around the website so people can look at it.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Julio. Yeah, I just redid my website. There's a little bio there about me. That's me on the set of a short film called Till Death that I shot, directed by Megan Welch. And then if you scroll down a little bit, that's my bio. Got some kind of laurels for film festivals that some of my stuff has been in, a little below there. And then if you'll look, there's a place where you can see my reel, and then where it says retro format, and I'm looking right now, I'm talking about the menu. That's the spot on my website where you can see my work with Retro Format Silent Films, which is a silent movie arts nonprofit. We do silent movie screenings online once a month, and there's a link there where you can watch our latest efforts. And then the Camera Report is my podcast, in which I interview filmmakers and cinematographers. I took a break from it, a long break. I haven't done it in several years, but I'm going to be relaunching the podcast very soon. I have already recorded a couple of episodes that are upcoming. And
Very nice.
Last thing I'll say is one of the reasons I laid it down a few years ago was I got to interview Ann Coates, the editor of Lawrence of Arabia, which is to me the greatest movie ever made. Also Back to the Future. She actually passed away last year, and she was elderly when I interviewed her, but it was really like one of the greatest things I've ever gotten to do, which is interview the editor of Lawrence of Arabia, talk to her about David Lean and the time they spent together in the editing room, have her share anecdotes about that. So if anything, if you listen to any of those podcasts, I highly recommend listening to the Ann Coates episode. It's really great.
Awesome. So let's play your reel here real quick. It's only 2 minutes long. James, did you want to say something?
Oh, I think that's incredible. I want to listen to that episode.
Yeah,
it sounds great.
That is incredible. All right, let's play your reel here so people can see your work.
Thanks. This music was from, I feel like I should do a DVD commentary right now.
Yeah, do it.
This music was from the Apollo 11 documentary that came out I think in 2019. It was amazing. It was my favorite film of that year, and I loved the music. It was amazing. These are just various films I've shot. The Invisible Man. That one's called Cine. That's from a documentary I shot. Did some Doritos commercials for the Crash the Super Bowl thing a few years ago. Music video. And then that one where you saw the guy looking over the water, that was a black and white film that I shot. It was one of my favorite films that I've ever shot.
Very nice work.
Thanks, buddy. When you put 8 years of work back to back, it looks pretty good. That thing is called Flies. That's my friend Brody. He directed this movie called Flies. He also directed this, Birth, and he directed the one with the dog that was called Good Boy, and Cave Morons. Brody is my most frequent collaborator. His name is Brody Gassar. You can look him up on Vimeo.
Ooh, very Star Wars-esque shot right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, just needed a second son.
A second. Oh, well, you couldn't because you would have been sued by
by
Disney.
Disney.
So there it is.
We
Beautiful
trademark.
images.
SeanPmalone.com or Sean.Malone@gmail.com. If you're a filmmaker watching this stream for any reason, hit him up. Hit him up for some work. You will get some quality work, quality lighting work, if you hire Sean P. Malone for a cinematographer. So that's the end of our show, guys. The Star Wars saga is over. It's just sad that we had to end on a sad note with the trilogy because of Disney's destruction of the trilogy. But it is what it is. You know, not everything good lasts forever, as the saying goes, right? So next week we'll be talking about another movie that actually ended on a high note, and that's the Back to the Future trilogy, which will be hosted by Sean P. Malone next week. So join us here again next Friday at 7:00 Pacific time. And yeah, if you guys want to join us and ask us questions. You know, Sean is a freaking, like I said, encyclopedic knowledge. He has encyclopedic knowledge of Back to the Future, and he'll be able to answer anything that you may be wondering about. If you have seen Back to the Future or have not seen Back to the Future, you should watch it so that way you understand all the references that we talk about next week. Was it something you wanted to share, Sean? There it is. Look at that. See?
Yes. Beautiful.
So hop
And
in, guys.
and the door opens. Nice. So
Hop in and join us.
the DeLorean car was a fantastic looking car. It was a great look for the movie, but we'll talk more about it next week. So, is there anything last any words you guys want to say before we call it a night? Sean, go ahead, Sean, if you have any last words.
May the force be with you.
James?
Can't wait to go back to the future.
Can't
Nice.
wait to go back in time.
All right, guys. With that said, have a good night. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next Friday. Have a nice weekend.